is going to be recorded. There you go. But like I said, I'll give it a minute or two just to let you all settle in and get comfortable, and then I'll talk you through what we're going to discuss over the next maybe 25 minutes, half hour. The main aim really of this is to hopefully be able to help with any questions you might have. So if you've got anything you want to ask about anything in particular to do with a personal statement, if you're just starting it now, or if you're coming towards the end and you want just a bit of advice from a university point of view, we can cover that as well. So please do feel free to get as many questions as you can. You can ask questions throughout. If you look at the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen, there's your chance to ask questions. So do make the most of that. I've got my colleague Rachel behind the scenes as well, who's going to help to type some questions out if we do get a lot. So it means that Rachel's able to answer some throughout the talk as I'm going through the presentation as well. So do please ask away. I'll give it again another 30 seconds just to let more people come in. But like I've said, this is hopefully just a chance to give you a kind of final rundown of what the statement is, some top tips for what to put in there, what we'd like to see from a university point of view. And then towards the end, any questions you might have as well. If, of course, you've got questions that are unrelated to personal statements, we can get to those later as well. We want to use this as a chance for you to get as much information as possible. Before I start, some of you may have been able to join us over the last 2 days. We had our transition to university talk on Monday and our university interviews talk yesterday. Hopefully you found them helpful. We do have 2 more this week after today. So we've got one tomorrow, which I think will be great, is the student life talk, including a Q&A with current students. The good thing about that is it's quite a rare chance to hear from current students at Cardiff University. So it'd definitely be worth considering that. And then on Friday, a bit more information about student finance, which I do appreciate is not the most exciting topic in the world, but it is really, really important for you guys moving forward. So definitely something to consider for the next 2 days. I'll get started now. I've given it a few minutes, so I will get started into the main aspect of this talk itself, which is based on personal statements. So the first thing we always talk about is what it actually is and why it's so important. I know you guys are very familiar with what the personal statement is, but just from a university point of view, we want to just give you a bit more of an idea about why it's so important. Sometimes I get asked by students, is it really worth putting your all into it? Is it really that important? And the answer is always going to be yes, because it does form part of the application decision. Admissions tutors will always read your personal statement. It may have a slightly less weighting than grades for lots of courses, lots of universities, but it will always form part of their decision, because it's the only chance, unless there's an interview, where they really get to find out more about you as a student and as a person. What sort of knowledge have you got? What sort of interest in the topic have you got? All of which I will come to very shortly. But that's why it is so important. The thing with the statement is that it may sound like a drag. I know I did it many years ago now, but I remember thinking, I'm not looking forward to doing this. But once you get into it, and some of you guys who I'm sure are well into yours, once you get into it, it actually becomes quite easy to write, because you're writing about yourself and because you're talking about a topic that hopefully you've got an interest in, which I'll get to shortly. It should be quite straightforward to write that, and that's there to help you as well. So just some more information about the statement itself. There is a limit to how much you can write. So the best way to work it out when you're doing it on Word, for example, is through the character limit, because the 47 lines limit is when you input it into the UCAS form. So don't try and work it out by 47 lines on Word, because that doesn't necessarily equate to 47 lines in the UCAS form. The best way to work it out is by 4,000 characters. And that includes obviously letters, but also punctuation, spaces, and paragraph spaces as well. So that's where the limit comes into it. 4,000 characters may sound like a lot. And if some of you are just getting started or in the early stages, you may think that you're going to struggle to fill 4,000 characters. But what you probably will find, and what most students seem to find, is the more they go through planning and the more they talk about what they want to put in there, and the more they write down and do some research into what sort of things that goes into the statement, 4,000 characters isn't actually that much at all. So it does really require you to be very clear and concise, and that is why lots of students do a good number of drafts. A statement is not the sort of thing you can just do overnight or over one weekend. It does require a lot of time and a lot of attention as well, a lot of planning, and that's where you'll find that 4,000 characters suddenly doesn't seem that much. In terms of what it is, it's a structured statement all about you, basically. That the name gives it away. It's to find out more about you as a person and as a student. And it's there for admissions tutors to try and work out who's the most suitable person for that course. When I talk you through what sort of things to include, I'll talk you through things like an interest, but fundamentally, admissions tutors need someone to come on the course who's got a genuine passion for it, who's got a genuine interest in that topic. And that's why, by reading a personal statement, they can find that sort of information out. It can be vital to the process. Like I said, it's always going to be taken into account. The weighting of it can change year in, year out, because it can depend on how popular courses are. Courses that maybe one year become suddenly very popular, they may have to look at the statement in much more detail and as one of the main factors to help them make a decision. Because if everyone's applying with similar grades, they'll then look at the statement to find out who's more suitable for that role and that course. And like I mentioned, you do need to take your time over it. It's not the sort of thing you can just kind of do last minute. It's not the sort of thing that you can think, well, deadline's next week. I'll sort it out. I'll sort it out over the weekend. Because it's not going to be as easy as that. And for you guys who are well into it, of which I imagine there's probably quite a few of you, you'll know that it does require a lot of attention and a lot of time as well. I mentioned briefly there the deadline, just so you're aware of deadline dates. I'm sure you are. But the UCAS deadline for most courses in the UK and most universities is the 15th of January. The medicine, dentistry and Oxbridge deadline was on 15th of October, so that's already passed. But for all other courses in all the universities, the UCAS deadline's in the new year. You may find, though, that your school or college has an earlier internal deadline. If you're not sure about that, just speak to your careers team or speak to your tutor and find out if they do have an internal deadline within your school or college, just so you know what you're working towards. But with deadlines, you want to, of course, as with anything, you want to make sure you are working towards that. And like I said, if you are looking at the 15th of January deadline, you don't really want to leave too much to do near that deadline, because you start to stress there, you start to panic more, and it's not going to be your best work then. Okay, so now, importantly, I'm going to talk through what sort of things you've got to include in a statement. So these are the sort of things that admission tutors are typically going to be looking for. When I go through them, some of them you may think, well, that's fairly obvious. Others you may not really have considered that much, but these are the sort of things they're going to be keeping an eye out for, I would say. They're not necessarily going to have a tick box, but they will be looking for certain things, which I'm going to talk through over the next kind of 5 minutes. The first thing they're looking for is something I mentioned briefly earlier on. Is simply just to have a genuine interest in that topic. Now, if I just kind of go back a little bit as to how important the interest is, one of the hardest parts about writing a personal statement is getting it started, is getting into it. If you've chosen something you have a genuine interest and a genuine passion for, you're going to find that much, much easier. That first hurdle is going to be so much easier to get over, because it's a topic you know about, it's a topic you enjoy. Also, you're going to find it easier to write and it's going to flow more. Because if I was to say to you now, think of your favorite topic either in school, your favorite TV show, musician, film, sports team, whatever, I want you to go and write 47 lines on that, which is around about 1 A4 size sheet of paper typically. Because you've got a genuine interest in that, you're going to find it quite straightforward and it's going to flow more. When I read that, then I'm going to be able to see that you do have a genuine interest in that topic, because you're clearly talking about a topic you know about and you like. It's going to come naturally. It's not a case of saying, oh, I really love this, I really love that. It'll come very naturally. Whereas if I was to say to you, right, I want you to write 47 lines on a topic I've chosen, if you've got no interest in that whatsoever, that again is going to show, but in a negative light. I'm going to be able to see fairly easily that you don't really have much of an interest in that topic. You're not really that engaged in it. And that is going to count against you. So the best thing you can do with a personal statement is make sure you've chosen a course you've got a genuine interest in. I know it can be difficult. It took me a long, long time, a fair bit of research, but do make the most of the chances to do research either online or in prospectuses, for example, and you'll find the right course. But that gives you a massive head start then. So always think about what your interest is in. Is it something you've done in school or college? If it is, then you might have been inspired by your current studies. And if so, tell us which ones they were. For example, if you're looking at doing something like psychology, if you were to say, I really enjoy psychology at A level, that yeah, that would show a bit of an interest, but it wouldn't be anywhere near enough detail about what we need to see. Whereas if you pick out a couple of modules from your psychology A level, maybe things like child psychology or forensic psychology linked to criminology, maybe, if that's your particular interest, you're showing deeper knowledge and you're showing you've got more of an idea about what your interest is in. And if they're topics studied on the courses you're applying for, then that's going to stand out even more. So think about what you're doing at the moment and think about it in more detail. Don't just try and think of things on the surface. Try and go a bit deeper into it, because that'll make you stand out and you'll be someone who they can see knows what they're talking about. Think about why you want to study it. Is it because you want to go into a certain career? Is it because you've got a genuine interest in that topic, which is great? Is it because maybe your parents work in that field, so you've kind of grown up in that environment? There's no real kind of wrong reason to study a course, but it is always quite good for tutors to know why you want to study it. Where did that interest stem from? Just so they've got an idea. Things like background reading are also really, really good to do. Given the current climate and the fact that you can't really do a lot of physical stuff in terms of experience, I would say things like reading and research are much more valuable now. So any sort of reading you may have done into that topic, any sort of research you may have done into it, that again is going to be very useful, because it shows deeper knowledge and it shows more of an interest in it as well. So that's always quite good to do as well. Other things like, are you doing an EPQ? If you are doing an EPQ and that is linked to the course you're applying for, then that shows further knowledge as well. So that can be, you can mention that in the statement by all means as well. So really think about why you want to study it. Think about your interest. Think about, do I have enough of an interest in this? Because that will come very naturally. Tell us what you've done now. Even if it's something you're thinking of doing which you haven't done in school, that's where things like reading and research can come into it in more detail, because they'll want to see that you've done a little bit of digging into that sort of course in terms of the research side of it. So definitely worth looking into that. But like I said, if you choose a course you've got a genuine interest in, that's going to come very naturally, and it's going to flow a lot more as well. The next stage then is things like work experience. Now this is a difficult one at the moment, because for a lot of students, this would have been impossible this year, because obviously since March there's been lockdown restrictions. It may have been very difficult for students to have done this. So please don't panic, please don't worry about it, because obviously universities and courses are very aware of the restrictions that were in place, and they're very aware that students have been unable, or it's been impossible to get any experience. This is where things like reading and research comes into it. If you're able to tell us in a statement that you want to do medicine, for example, or a healthcare course like nursing, you've been unable to get physical experience, but you've done a lot of reading into this, doing the research into this sort of topic, that will show us a lot of interest, and it'll show us you're going that extra mile really to find that as much as you can. There's also places you can get like online work experience. So if you do look at, if you do search for online work experience on different topics, there's plenty of places you can get more information there. For healthcare courses, it is essential to have some sort of experience. But again, like I said, it doesn't have to be physical this year. It can be things like reading and research and online experience as well. The important thing about any experience you've had, even if you've been able to do it before the lockdown, is always think about what you've gained from doing that. Why was that useful for you? What skills have you actually learned from that experience that you can then carry across onto your course? It's those sort of transferable skills they're looking for. To think of a few examples, critical thinking, problem solving, teamwork, leadership, communication. They're the sort of skills that would probably look quite good in a statement. And if relevant to the course you're looking at, then even better. So always think about, for any experience or reading or research you've done, what have you actually gained from doing that? What have you learned from it? And how can you then transfer that into the course? Another part you can talk about, now this one's a bit of an unusual one because you don't need to include this, but if you do know what you want to do when you're older, if say you're choosing a course based on the career you want to go on to afterwards, then that's fine. That's great. That's good to mention it. It's good to tell us about that because it shows us quite a clear path. But please don't panic and think, oh, God, okay, now I need to know what I want to do when I'm older. We know it's hard enough to say what do you want to do at uni next year. To then say what do you want to do in 4 or 5 years' time is so much more difficult. So we're not expecting anyone to have to do that now. What you can do also is, even if you don't know what you want to do when you're older, you can do a bit of research and find out what sort of careers students from that course have got onto maybe, or you could find out what sort of skills you're going to develop on that course and how that can lead you into a whole host of different sort of careers. For example, I did English language at university, and I didn't choose that with a certain career in mind. I chose it because I thought the sort of skills I'd learned from that course and skills I'd develop could lead me into opportunities all over the world. So you can use that to your advantage as well. Don't panic, like I said, and think you need to know what you want to do when you're older, because you don't. But have a think about, if you do know what you want to do, is this course going to help you towards that? What are you hoping to gain from that course that can lead you into that career? But like I said, even if you don't know what you want to do, still think about what you hope to gain from that course. One quite good way to think about ending a statement is to kind of think about the next steps, and you could mention the fact that you hope that the sort of skills you hope to develop from that course can lead you into a whole host of different careers, and we're talking personal skills and academic skills as well. So bear that in mind. Don't panic and think you need to know what you want to do when you're older, because you don't, but you can use that to your advantage either way, really. And other stuff they need to see, and these are sort of things that I think sometimes students think we're not that bothered about, but it is really important to include, are things like your hobbies and interests. So what you do in your spare time. What admissions tutors like from students is someone who's able to balance their academic life and their social life. Now, if you are able to do that in school or college now, say you're doing an A-level or an access course, for example, alongside that you play a sport, alongside that you've maybe got a part-time job, or you volunteer, or you're a prefect or a mentor in school, head boy, head girl, anything like that, that's all showing that you can balance different aspects of your life very well. And that is what university is really all about, balancing your academic and your social life. At Cardiff alone, we've got over 65 sports teams and over 200 societies. Now, if we didn't want students to get involved in those, then we wouldn't run them. So showing you can do that now gives us a good indication as to what sort of student you're going to be in if you make it to university. So again, as I mentioned with experience, if you are playing sports, for example, and I always use sport as an example because I played a lot of sport in school myself, think about what you've learned from that. What sort of skills do you gain from playing sport? I would say communication skills, teamwork, quite valuable. I'll show you an example shortly of how you can put that into good use. But always think about the sort of skills you're gaining. If, for example, you've done some volunteering, what have you learned from that? What have you gained from that? If you've got a part-time job, what sort of things do you gain from that? What sort of skills do you learn and develop from that? So these sort of hobbies and interests, these different aspects of it show us more about you, and they show you as an all-round student. And then that gives us a good indication as to what we can expect from that student at university. As always, if you can relate to anything you've done to the course, then that's going to be great. That's going to be useful. For example, if you're looking to do a healthcare course and you volunteered at a nursing home, then that's going to be about as relevant as you can possibly get. So always think about ways you can relate it to the course if possible, but always think of the sort of skills you've gained and how you can make that relatable to the course and also the time at university as well. So this bit should only really be a kind of a smallish paragraph. You don't want to spend too much of your time talking about hobbies and interests, but it is good to include maybe in about 4, 5, 6 lines nearer the end. It is good to include that. Other things that are good to include, like Duke of Edinburgh, EPQ, like I mentioned earlier on, anything like that is also very, very, very useful to see as well. So do make sure you do leave a bit of space for hobbies and interests, because we do need to see students who are able to balance these different aspects of their academic and social life, like I said. Now, that over the past sort of like 8 minutes, they're the kind of main things we're looking for from a personal statement in terms of the content. So like for you guys who've already started and are well into it, you may already have looked into this and thought, well, that all sounds great because I've included that. Some of you may be thinking, right, well, I hadn't really included anything about hobbies and interests. But like I said, it is good to include that because it shows different aspects of you as a person and as a student. Okay. One thing to always try and do, and this is linked to when I mentioned about the skills you gained, is always try and think about how you can make sure the tutor who's reading it quite clearly sees the point you're trying to make. That the thing with a personal statement is that when the tutor reads it, they haven't got you sat next to them or on the other end of a phone saying, right, you've said this, what do you mean by that? Can you elaborate a bit more? What they want to see when they read a personal statement is quite a clear and concise statement which gets to the point. Tutors may read through hundreds or even thousands of applications and personal statements. So they need to be able to see in that one piece of paper really what that student is trying to say. But a good way to keep things clear and concise, but always make sure you are elaborating, is to think of this ABC guide. This ABC guide can be useful for statements and also interviews as well. But it's a really simple 3-step rule to make sure that the tutor gets what you're saying, and to make sure you kind of get to the point, really, to be blunt, of what you're trying to say. So a good start would be to say what you've done. Now, this could be experience, it could be reading, research, playing a sport, being a mentor in school, it can be anything like that. But that's a good start, but it's not enough. You've got to then include a bit more into that. The next stage is to say what you've learned from that. So I've done this, and these are the skills I've developed from it. That already, from the second step, is a much stronger point than just leaving it at point 1. What you've got then is the best point will be someone who's able to relate that to the course and show how those skills are transferable. So really, really important to think about those 3 steps. And the reason it's called the ABC guide is because you've got the activity first, so what you've done. Then you've got the benefits, so the sort of skills you've gained from that. And then you've got the course. How can you relate that to your course, or typically, generally, just your time at university? So always think about those 3 steps. And again, like I said, you can use these in interviews as well. But this just makes sure that the tutor isn't reading it thinking, well, that's fine, but I don't really get the point they're trying to make, because they're not always going to give you the opportunity to explain it to them. They may just say, right, I'm not really seeing enough from this statement, so I'm unable to make this student an offer. Now, an example of using the ABC guide, and this is linked back to sports again, I'm afraid, just because, like I said, it was quite a big thing for me. Someone could say, I was captain of the school football team and I've always been good at sports. That's an okay point. It kind of says what it is, but if you put yourselves in the position of an admissions tutor, you might think, well, so what? That's fine. I can see from this that the student plays football and they were captain, that they're good at sport, but how is that relevant to my course? How can I make sure that's going to be useful for me? So what you could do using the ABC guide is you could say, as captain of the school football team, I have developed excellent teamworking skills. So immediately in that first sentence, this student has used the A and the B, the activity and the benefit. They've said what they've done and they've said what they've gained from that. What they could then go on and say is, I also feel that playing football has provided me with the experience of successfully balancing my academic and social life, and I plan to continue this balance whilst at university. So that's the C part. That's the bit where they can relate it to their course or their time at university. So although that's a couple more lines, it's a much stronger point, and you're probably reading that thinking, yeah, that does sound a lot better. And you can see the A, the B, and the C throughout that. So that's a good way to make sure that a tutor can read your statement and see it's getting to the point and it's showing why it's relevant. So always try and think of the activity, the benefit of the course, to make sure you are leaving those points strong enough. Okay, so just as I come towards the last sort of 10 minutes, I'm going to run through some top tips. So some of these will be things I have discussed already, so I won't go over them in too much detail. Other things will be things that I haven't really mentioned yet. But there's always going to be do's and don'ts with the statement. And these are things that quite often I get asked questions on. So hopefully this will answer any questions you may have at the moment. With do's, like I said earlier on, the best way to kind of to start a personal statement is to make sure you've chosen the right course. So make sure you've done detailed research into the different courses available. I know it's probably more tricky at the moment without being able to go to open days, but making the most of things like virtual open days and university websites and those sort of things are just as valuable. And if anything, use it to your advantage and find out as much as you can. This year, more than ever, universities have more information online, so you can use that to your advantage. But make sure you've chosen the right course. Do research into that sort of career and into that sort of field of study, because again, you can talk about it with more knowledge then, and that shows more interest. Do take your time and plan properly. Now, this is one thing I really can't stress enough. Like I said earlier on, you can't just wing it over a weekend. It's not like, I remember when I was in school with some aspects of homework, I'd leave it last minute and do it then, and it was never any good. It was never my best work. And that's the same with a statement. That if you rush it and you leave it last minute, it's not going to be the best work you can do. And the last thing you want to do when you apply is think, I really wish I'd spent a bit more time on that. We've all had it, I'm sure. I know I have definitely with things like exams, where I haven't really revised or taken as much time as I wanted to. And then I'm sat there at the exam table thinking, I wish I'd spent more time here. What was I thinking? And it's the same with this personal statement. Once you've applied, once you've sent it off through UCAS, you want to sit back, relax, and think that was perfect. I can't have added any more to that statement. I checked over it. I had it looked over. I made sure it was my best work. I made sure it really showed me off as a student. So you can just relax and wait for the inevitable good news then. Whereas if it's the other way around and you have rushed it, you're going to sit back and think, I could have done so much more. Then I'm going to just spend weeks now or days worrying and thinking it wasn't that good, so I'm not going to get made an offer. So make sure you take your time and plan properly. With planning, what you can do is you can think of the things I mentioned earlier on, or you can look online and look in things I'll show you shortly. Look at those and maybe do mind maps or spider diagrams and think of how you can elaborate on each different topic. Think of how you work best and think about how you can use that to your advantage. Like I mentioned, include academic qualities as well as hobbies. We do need to see you as an all-round student. The majority of it, of course, should be academic, and then there should be a little bit about hobbies near the end, like I mentioned. Be positive. One really important thing to do is to be positive. It's without trying to make it too much of a motivational speech. Just applying to university is something to be positive about in the first instance. So that's a great kind of first step. We need to find out about your strengths. We don't really need to hear about any weaknesses. It is difficult to talk about yourself. I know from experience that things like interviews and talking about yourself and trying to big yourself up can be very awkward because you feel a bit like maybe you're kind of being a bit arrogant. But be positive and confident, because that's what admissions tutors need to see. They need to see students who are confident in their own ability and they believe in themselves, and then the tutor will have no reason to think any different. There is also then a fine line between being positive and confident and then going too far. So it is really important to make sure you're not kind of going too overboard with the arrogance, because that's not going to look very good to a tutor. I read a draft statement a while ago, well, a good number of years ago now, where the student had finished with, I believe if you don't give me a place on this course, you will regret it. Now, I could have taken that as a threat, which I chose not to. But for me, it just came across as very cocky. And this person was saying, look, I'm the best person for this. So if you don't make me a decision, then that's on you. Which if a tutor is reading thousands of those, that's not going to go down very well. Luckily for them, it was only one of a few I was looking at that day. So I could just say, look, this isn't a very good idea. So be positive, be confident, be polite as well. Make sure you're not underselling yourself. I know when I did my first draft and gave it to my parents to look over, they just said, look, you've undersold yourself loads. You haven't told us about you in enough detail. You haven't mentioned this, haven't mentioned that. I showed it to teachers and they were saying, look, you haven't mentioned this or that either. Because like I said, it is difficult to talk about yourself. So the earlier you start, the more drafts you do, the easier it gets. Check your spelling. If you make a few spelling mistakes, that's not going to be the reason you're going to get rejected by a university. All it may do is put a little bit of doubt into a tutor's mind. They may think that you've rushed it. I know when I read draft statements, if someone's statement is littered with mistakes, I think, well, this has been rushed. They haven't had it checked over. Whereas if someone's given me a statement and the spelling and grammar is all perfect, I've got nothing to doubt and nothing to kind of see as a negative at all. So do check your spelling, do check your grammar. Give it to someone else to look over, because they can spot things maybe you'd missed. If you're doing like 7 or 8 drafts of this, it can be difficult to read over and over and over again because it all blurs into one and you might miss things then. But give it to parents, give it to friends, siblings, teachers to look over, and they can help you with a bit more advice then as well. But like I said, a few mistakes here and there aren't going to get you rejected, but it may put a bit of doubt into a tutor's mind. And the last thing you want to do is give them any reason to kind of look elsewhere. And like I mentioned, print a copy if you can, or just send it around to check for errors and get feedback. It's always useful to do that, to have a fresh pair of eyes to look over it. And then, of course, where you've got do's, you can have a list of do nots as well. Don't give excuses. If this kind of links to me saying be positive, don't show us any weaknesses. But if you've missed maybe large periods of school or college for certain reasons, or if you've been undergraded, for example, then that sort of thing won't go in your statement. That'll be put in a teacher's reference. So a reference is a really important part of the application as well. But we don't need to hear anything negative or any weaknesses here, because things like missing out long periods of school for certain reasons will go in a teacher's reference. Don't copy others. There is something the UCAS had, which I'll show you shortly, which does away with any plagiarism. The one thing I'd say is that you don't need to be tempted to do that. You're all going to find you've got too much to talk about, so you don't need to kind of take anything off anyone else. I know there's a temptation sometimes for a small minority of students in the UK to think, right, well, I've only got about 3,000 characters here. Let's just find something online, or let's just copy one of my mate's statements and take their paragraph. But it will be flagged up, as I'll show you. And the last thing you want to do again is be in that sort of situation. You've all got things to talk about. You've all got things to show you can do and that you can offer the university, and that's what we want to see. Don't leave it to the last minute. I've talked about this already, but it is so important to make sure you're not leaving things too late, because you'll find then that you're starting to panic and it's not going to be your best work. And like I've already said, it does take a while. And then for anyone here who's already done a number of drafts of this, you'll know it does take a long time to cover this. With naming universities, this is a bit of a different one. So with naming universities, you can name them if you've been on like a taster day or a summer school or a taster lecture. If you've been to a university for anything like that, then that's completely fine. If, however, you are saying, I really want to go to Cardiff, while that's great for us, it's going to completely rule out every other university you've applied for, because you only get to write one personal statement. So if you're in that one statement trying to make sure that everyone who reads it thinks you want to apply for their course and they see enough of an interest in their course in uni, you don't want to name universities in that sense. But like I said, you can if you've been there for a summer school or a taster day, that's fine. If you apply to Cardiff and you've been to a summer school, say at Bristol, for example, that's going to look great to us. So that's completely fine. Like I mentioned, don't sell yourself short. Try and make sure you are bigging yourself up and you are being positive and confident. You've all got amazing things to talk about, so you've got to make sure you do get that across and show us at the university that is what you're able to offer the university. So make sure you are doing that throughout. Don't waffle. Waffling, basically, if you're not familiar, is where you just ramble on about points for a long period of time, getting to no real end kind of summary. If you're in 47 lines, spending 15 to 20 lines talking about a book you've read, I would suggest that's going to include a bit of waffling. So make sure you're keeping things clear and concise, and you're giving enough of the things I mentioned earlier, enough page space, really. With waffling, like I said, if you think a tutor's reading thousands of these, they need to be able to read something that gets straight to the point and get straight to what they're trying to say. Whereas if you're talking for too long about one point, it's not going to do that. And also, don't lie. Again, I don't like to be too negative on these sort of talks, but do have to say, if you lie in a statement, it more often than not will get found out, and it will most likely lead to a rejection. Like I mentioned with plagiarism, you guys have no reason to lie. You've got no reason to throw things in you haven't done, because you've all got amazing things to talk about, and you've all got skills and kind of abilities that they are looking for. So you don't need to lie, but just be aware that it will get found out. I know that sounds a bit like Liam Neeson in Taken, where they will find it out. But if you do lie in a statement, more often than not, the university will be aware, because they'll do a bit of digging or a bit of research, or things won't add up that well. So you don't need to do that, and you guys are not going to do that, I'm sure. Okay, just as I come towards the last few minutes, I've mentioned this already with the copy and others thing. This is the thing I mentioned the UCAS had called the Similarity Detection Service. Basically, when you apply through UCAS, every single statement from that year is checked against the library of those already in the system. When I say those are already in the system, I mean ones from last year, the year before that, and it goes back a number of years. So, for example, if you've got older siblings, their statement will still be in this database. So again, if you were to take lines from theirs, it's going to flag up. Now, it's not going to flag up if you're doing the odd sentence the same, because they're not expecting you to reinvent new ways of saying things. But it's where there's like chunks of a statement or full paragraphs that are the exact same word for word. That's where things are going to flag up. And they've also got a variety of websites and books as well they know students have used in the past, and it'll flag up as being plagiarized. Again, if you've got a bit of space in a statement, some students might think, well, let's look online and just Google good lines to add to a statement. But UCAS is very familiar with those. And like I said, the last thing you want to do is have that flagged up, because what happens is that if your statement is deemed to have been plagiarized, they will let a university know this. Now, a university will either reject you, which is probably most likely, or the best case scenario is they'll say, can you write a new personal statement now? Once you've done one, for anyone who's near the end of theirs, you'll know the last thing you want to do is write a new personal statement. So don't be tempted to do that. Just to finish off, before I do take any questions you might have, There's plenty of places you can find out more. If you are looking at certain universities and you want to try and lean more towards one university, go on their website and just search personal statement, because there'll be loads of advice and guidance on there for you. The UCAS website, of course, has guidance for it. What we've got at Cardiff University, we've got this downloadable personal statement planner. So if you go on the website at cardiff.ac.uk, if you search personal statement, there will be this downloadable four-sided A4 leaflet, which has got tips and guidance, it's got help with planning, it's got things to fill in, like worksheets to fill in, so you can really think about the ABC guide I mentioned. There's important dates on there. There's quotes from admissions shooters, so the people you want to hear from most, I would imagine. And it also, of course, importantly tells you what sort of things to include as well. So do make the most of resources. Do make the most of university websites, because there's loads of information they can give you. You can even reach out to universities and say, look, I'm thinking of applying for this course. What do you typically look for in a personal statement? Because they'll then let you know exactly what sort of things they're going to be hoping to see. So really important to bear that in mind. Really important to make the most of those sort of resources that are going to be available for you. You're not alone doing it. It does, of course, have to be your own work, but there's plenty of places you can get advice and guidance. You can get support from your schools and your colleges' careers teams. You can reach out to us at universities. You can look on university websites like this, like I mentioned. There's plenty of ways you can find out more, but try and not be too overawed by a statement. Just to finish off before I take any questions, I know it is seen as such a big, important bit of work, but try and not be too overawed by it, because like I mentioned earlier on, if you've chosen a topic you have a genuine interest in, then you're probably going to find it much more straightforward than you think, and you may end up enjoying writing it. I know that may seem crazy for anyone who's already writing theirs and maybe hating it, but when you're talking about you're talking about a topic you have an interest in, something you want to do when you're older, maybe it should become quite natural, and it should be something you do enjoy writing. So just bear that in mind as you go through, I would say, and just be aware there's loads of information available to you. I will leave the talk part of it here. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to revert to the Q&A. So like I said, if you do have any questions, do fire them into the Q&A. We've got the best part of 20 minutes now, so we do have a good chunk to get through as many questions as possible. They can be questions on personal statements, anything to do with the application. If you have any questions, then I would say please feel free to fire them away. It can be about any topic to do with university. Do make the most of the time we've got here. I've got myself here and my colleague Rachel behind the scenes to help out. We've got one question already. How would you recommend trimming a personal statement down to be at or under the character limit? It's a good question. One of the things that most students will do when they first do their draft is be quite a substantial amount over the limit of the personal statement. What you've got to do is you've got to, a lot of students when they first write a statement will kind of add in longer words just for the sake of adding in longer words and making it trying to sound professional, but you don't need to do that, because that is going to really eat into your character limit. What you want to do is you want to read over it and over and over again. You want to think, right, well, I've spent quite a bit of time here talking about one topic. Why don't I take a line or a bit of it out, keep the first document saved, and then read them both? If the second new one where I've taken the line out reads just as well, if it takes nothing away from the first one, I know that's a line I can lose then. So go through it, really go through it properly and thoroughly. And even taking out the odd word here and there can really make a big difference. Don't be tempted. I know some students think, the best way to save spaces is to have no paragraphs. But that's not going to look very good. It needs to read well. It needs to look like a proper bit of work. And by that, you need to have paragraphs. But just for everything you're talking about, be it an interest, be it a book, be it research, be it experience, be it a topic in school, try and think of a few lines for each one. Don't try and do too much on each different section there, because that will eat into your limit. But like I said, have two drafts with you. Take bits out here and there. If you read it and it reads the same, if it takes nothing away from the first one, then that's going to be fine. Then you can remove that line, and that sort of thing will be quite an easy way to do that, I would say. So do get any other questions in, guys. We've got the best part of 20 minutes, so I do have a lot of time to take any questions, like I said, about a statement or about anything else to do with university. One question I quite often get is, how do I start and how do I end a statement? And I would say it's not really something to spend too much time kind of mulling over. When you start a statement, you don't need to kind of really grab their focus really like straight away. A lot of students think, the best thing to start with is a really bold statement, or maybe even a joke at times, which just I would say doesn't really work. What you want to do to start it is you want to try and think, right, well, I've got to show an interest in this. So in the first paragraph, maybe I'll just talk about where my interest stem from. If I want to do politics, where did my interest in politics really kind of originate? And that just sets up the statement quite nicely. And then to finish it, you always want to try and make sure you've got a little paragraph, kind of like a conclusion at the end, like a bit of a summary. Just maybe linking to maybe something, one or two things you've mentioned in the statement, and explaining why that would make you a good candidate and what you hope to do in the future maybe. So don't finish it too abruptly. Try and make sure there is some sort of conclusion or summary at the end, just to have a nice kind of closure to the statement. Another question, good question. How do you make one statement to match different courses at different universities? Good question. One thing I should have mentioned earlier on is when you are choosing your 5 course options, if you do decide to apply for 5 different places, try and make sure those 5 options are either the same topic or very similar. If you're going to apply for French, maths, sports and exercise science, history and geography, you're going to find it impossible in one statement to show enough of an interest in that sort of topic. So make sure you're choosing very similar, if not the same courses. Just in terms of not trying to kind of direct it too much towards one uni, look into all the different universities you're applying for and try and find different modules that they offer that are the same. Because if you're going to do history, a lot of universities will be offering similar sort of modules for history. They'll be looking at similar time periods, similar things that happened as well. So you can try and find the one that's maybe common in each of those and use that and talk about that as maybe an advantage. But just showing a genuine interest in that sort of topic area, that'll make sure you're not directing it too much towards one course. But it is tricky if you are going to choose different courses. It'll get very, very difficult then. For example, I applied for 4 English language courses and 1 English language and communication course, it was called. So my statement was very straightforward to write because it was similar topics, really. Another good question, what do you think makes a personal statement stand out? Ultimately, the thing they need to see is that someone's got a genuine interest in that subject, and that will come naturally. If you have chosen the course you do have a genuine interest in, then it will naturally flow so much better. Other things that they do like the look of it is when students can relate things they're doing now to that course. So if it's a topic you're doing in school or college, if you can talk about what you're learning now and the topics and modules you're doing now that can relate to those courses you're applying for, they like that as well, because you're showing your kind of your next steps. You're showing that what you're doing now is very valuable, and you're showing that what you're doing now is helping you make your decision moving forwards as well. So that's one of the main things they do like to see. But like I said, it will naturally flow if you have a genuine passion for that topic, and that's the main thing that you can do to make yourself stand out. And that comes before you start it. Making sure you've chosen the right topic, making sure you've chosen the right course, that will give you a big advantage when it comes to actually writing the personal statement. Do keep getting your questions in. There've been some great questions so far. We've got 15 minutes left, so I can take as many questions as possible. Like I said, if you've got any questions about Cardiff, maybe about different courses, about anything to do with university, you can make the most of the next 15 minutes to do that as well, if that's helpful. I can stay and help out with any topics you've got at all. Assuming we were to reapply a second time, would we using the same statement be considered as plagiarism? If you're the same student, then no, it wouldn't be considered plagiarism. So if you're reapplying, you can use the same statement. All I would suggest is maybe you may not want to do that, because if, for example, you're reapplying because you weren't made an offer for that course, it may have been that your statement didn't show enough of an interest, or it didn't show the sort of things they were looking for. So I would probably recommend trying to not write a whole new statement, but do change bits here and there, because it's more current, and also then the sort of things they're looking for is that you are able to talk about the course you're looking to apply for. Now, if that's changed, of course, you've got to change it. But like I said, it won't be seen as plagiarism. But if it's because you've not been made an offer, then one of the reasons that may have happened may be the statement. So you want to make sure that you are not putting yourself in that same position by just applying with the same statement. Another question, as an international applicant, is it necessary to justify why I want to study in Wales and the UK in general? Also, American word variations acceptable, or are they considered misspelled? American word variations would probably be considered misspelled. So if you use the UK dictionary with Word or anything like that, That's the best thing to do, I would say, in that instance. As an international applicant, it probably wouldn't matter, but it just does away with any concerns about that, I would say, to use the UK English one there. As an international applicant, it might be useful to explain why you're thinking of moving to the UK. It might be useful to show what it is about the UK that does interest you and makes you want to move to the UK. It's not going to be compulsory, but it just shows, again, a bit more research that you've done into your new location. So it's not going to count against you if you don't, but it may make you stand out if you're showing, yeah, this is why I want to move away and leave my home to go to a different country to study. Okay, another question. While filling the UCAS account, does examination qualification like Trinity College carry any benefit? How do you add them to your UCAS application? So any qualifications you've got, when you go through the UCAS application, there'll be a section about grades and inputting your qualifications. It's actually called qualifications. In there, it's got a full list of every single qualification you can take, and that'll be included. I think qualifications, like examination qualifications, don't necessarily count towards the points total for UCAS, but the admission tutor will be very aware that you've done them, and it can help you stand out if you've done extra kind of qualifications. So the tutor will be aware if you put it through the qualification section of the UCAS website. But when you're doing the UCAS form, they give you a lot of support and they tell you how to fill in the qualifications bit properly, because it can be very fiddly with all the different qualifications you can take. But do include it in the qualifications bit, because that will help your application. A couple of questions now, more to do with Cardiff, which is I'm more than happy to answer. So can you give me a brief insight into Cardiff University and living in Cardiff? I can definitely do that. I can see that you're unable to make tomorrow, so I'm more than happy to run through that quickly for you now. We are hoping, by the way, to be able to have these talks available from next week on a website somewhere, and we will send you an email further down the line to explain that when we do get that in place. Cardiff is, and I can link this to another question, sorry, from someone who's asking about Cardiff and if everything's quite close, is it easy to get around? Cardiff as a city is very small. It's a really small, compact city centre. It's quite often not what students expect. A lot of students hear it being a capital city and they think, oh, it's going to be quite spread out and drawn out and it's going to take ages to get from A to B. But Cardiff's the exact opposite of that. I am from Cardiff myself, as you may have worked out already, given my accent. But one of the reasons I stayed in Cardiff was because I knew the city very well, and I knew how valuable it was to have things so close. The main campus, Cathays campus, is around about a 5-minute walk away from the city centre. Accommodation is scattered around the main Cathays campus. I stayed in a place called Talabont, which is a big student village, and that was about a 10-15-minute walk to my lectures. And then, like I said, further 5 minutes and you're in the capital city centre with some of your best shopping, places to eat, sports stadiums, nights out, anything you can think of will be down the road. So it's a really great place to live, very welcoming place to live. Students at Cardiff typically fall in love with the place. So a lot of students who come to Cardiff Uni do end up working there afterwards in the city centre or somewhere local in the surrounding area, because they just love living in Cardiff so much. It's one of the most affordable cities in the UK. As worked out by NatWest for their student living index. So it's really easy to save money there as well. The fact that everything is so close means you save money getting around. You're not really having to get buses, trains or taxis anywhere. You can walk, or you can get a Next bike, which is a bit like the Boris bikes in London, where you get half an hour free, and then any other half hour after that is worth 50p. But to be honest, everywhere in Cardiff is within half an hour very easily. So more often than not, it's a free bike ride. The residences are spread out, like I said, so they're a bit further away. So that's really important to bear that in mind. But it's just, I could talk for hours. We've only got about 10 minutes left, so I won't take too much more time. But Cardiff as a city is for a lot of students, seems to be everything they're looking for. If you go on our website and you search why Cardiff, there's loads of advice and guidance on Cardiff as a city and why students do fall in love with the place. So it's really worth looking at that, I would say. Apologies if you can hear my baby crying in the background. He's heard me talk too much. I wanted to ask that I applied for childhood studies and primary education, but my other choice is social science. Is that relatable? Yes, you could relate social science. You could relate that sort of course to childhood studies and primary education. When you're writing your statement, when you're doing your research, though, when you're reading about the two different types or the different topics, think to yourself, can I relate this? If you can't relate them in the statement, I'd say you're going to find that quite difficult. But with if you can pick bits out of those courses that are relatable and do marry up quite nicely, then you can by all means talk about that in the statement, and that will be fine. But just be careful with choosing for different subjects, because it can work against you when you're writing a statement. Another question with accommodation: when and how should international applicants apply for accommodation? So basically, when you get made an offer by Cardiff University, you'll be sent information on applying for accommodation. So once you've applied, once you've had your offer, you'll be sent information about the application process for accommodation. Again, if you go on a website and search accommodation, there's much more information on there for you there. But once you made an offer, you'll be sent information about applying for accommodation there. Like I said a few times with the statement, it is something I know it sounds easy for me to say because I've done it and I don't need to do it again, but it should be something to try and really enjoy. It's your chance to show who you are. It's your chance to show why you're suitable for certain courses. Now, by talking about a topic you have a genuine interest in, that's going to be fairly straightforward. So do bear that in mind, and do make sure that you do enjoy it. You are being positive, and it's easier to do that if you plan properly and if you've taken your time properly. If you've rushed it, if you haven't really considered what you want to put in there, then you are going to find it quite difficult to enjoy it, because you're going to stress yourself out. But try and make sure you are using it to your advantage and showing who you are as a person and as a student. So any more questions, do please feel free to get them in. We've got about 7 minutes left, and I'll take any questions. Like you said, if you've got any questions about Cardiff as a university or as a city, more than welcome to kind of to help with those. One thing I said earlier on about looking at different university websites, and having gone through this very recently with one of my sister-in-laws who's been applying for university, who started this year. There is so much information available on university websites, and more than ever now, there'll be even more. So you can draw more comparisons from University A to University B, but it also means there's more advice for things like personal statements. So do make the most of it, and do really use it to your advantage, and try and work out how you can kind of really show who you are. Another question: how many people would you recommend sending the statement to? If I assume you mean to get it checked over, you don't want to send it to loads. If you were to send it to maybe maybe a parent or a sibling or a friend or a teacher, maximum 2. You don't really want to spend it to too many, because you're going to get different accounts then, and it's just going to end up confusing you more than anything. So I'd say give it to 2 people to have a look over, one of which will probably be someone in school or college, maybe one of your tutors. You might have someone who's designated your tutor for the statement, so send them a copy of it, but also parents and guardians, because I remember when I did mine, they were really helpful, my parents, in saying, look, you haven't mentioned this, or you haven't really talked about this, but I think it's really important that you do that. The question: when do we get a letter of offer? It depends on the course and the university you've applied for. Normally, universities try and get back to you fairly quickly after you've applied. But again, like I said, it does depend on what course you apply for and where you've applied to. So you'll normally hear fairly soon after you've applied to all your places, but it's difficult because it can take a while. Cardiff aims to get back to students very quickly, but it does depend on number of people applying and other things like that as well. Do we receive handouts and class materials from teachers, or do we have to print our own copies out? If you mean in university, so your lecturers, there'll normally be a reading list that you get early in the year, which you do pay for, but it's not very expensive. But that's got all the materials in for that whole term, so you'll get that. And there's also, of course, library resources. In Cardiff, we've got over 1.2 million books, so we've got loads of resources available for students. More of a logistical question: which parts of the UCAS application need to be filled in before you can get a reference letter in? I know you can't get your teacher to submit it before you complete certain qualifications. So basically, the reference will typically be one of the last things. You can fill in each section in any order you want, really, but normally when the reference comes into it, it's the last bit, because the teacher will write the reference and they will then send it through UCAS, to UCAS, sorry. So you've got to fill in everything properly. They will also input your predicted grades as well, of course, and that's what some universities will make their offers based on. So that's what they need to put in there before it can be sent. Do all personal statements get read, or more so if you're a borderline case? All statements will get read. The weighting of them may depend on if you're a borderline case. So if you're kind of hovering around the requirements they're looking for academically with the grades, it may be then that they look at a statement in much more weighting to help make a decision there. So they'll all get read. You know, they never ask you to do all this work and not read it. But the weighting of it and the value of it may depend on different factors. When do you get your offer for medicine? Medicine, hopefully we'll get offers out before Christmas. For Cardiff, our interviews this year are going to be in January. So they're normally held around about now in December, but given the pandemic, it's been pushed back a bit, which means the offers have been pushed back a bit as well. But hopefully before Christmas, you should hear. Does Cardiff offer scholarships for students doing medicine, at least during second or third years based on high achievements? Cardiff does have a number of Cardiff University scholarships where they offer scholarships based on grades obtained. Medicine at the moment isn't actually one of them. It's more subjects where they're seen as national shortage areas. So by that, I mean, if students aren't applying for those courses as much as maybe they have in the past, like say, for example, chemistry or physics, then sometimes there can be Cardiff University scholarships offering a scholarship for someone achieving 3 A's and accepting the offer by a certain time. Sorry. Does social science have any mini bite-sized modules or pre-modules? What you can do is, if you look on a website and you look at the social science course, you can find out the sort of modules that are going to be on offer. Now, there's not necessarily going to be pre-modules or anything like that. But it does give you a bit of an insight into the modules you can take, and then you can do a bit of further reading into that. So I know for a fact on our website for all of our courses, it does list some of the modules you can take. And by clicking on them, it gives you a bit more information about them. So then what you can do, is you can go away and you can read a bit more about that topic and find that more as well. So there is a chance to find that more from doing that. Just coming towards the last minute or so, any final questions, do please get them in. I do hope that today has been helpful. I know it's a statement, I know it is tricky, but like I said, try and enjoy it. I know that sounds like a weird thing to say, to try and enjoy writing a statement, but it's all about you. It's all about what you can offer and who you are as a student and as a person, and why ultimately you're suitable for that course. So try and make sure you're doing that. For any postgraduate questions about finance, the best thing to do is if you look on the website and search postgraduate, there'll be information on there for you. I don't know, I'm afraid, the answer to that question, but anything to do with postgraduate and finance linked together, if you look online, there'll be information for you there. Are there any other talks about the uni coming up? So we do have the talk tomorrow. I know you said you can't make that, but we are hoping to be able to make this available for these sort of talks available. So you should be able to see it afterwards. We are recording all these talks, so we can also we can send this talk out if we're unable to get it on our website. We will be doing this sort of thing again. So we will be sending out more information about something like this, maybe earlier in 2021. So in the new year, we may be doing something similar to this again. So you can find that a lot more then as well. You can also, every Wednesday between 4 and 6, if you go on our website, through the UniBuddy site, we do actually have some of our recruitment team there to answer any questions. So every Wednesday, you can come and ask us as many questions as you possibly want. Okay. Just one final question, it looks like. How are the exams like in uni? Do we have support? Yes, you get loads of support at university. You get a personal tutor who normally works in your department who can help out with any advice and guidance with that course. You'll get a student mentor at Cardiff University. A student mentor basically is someone who is in maybe year 2 or 3 of your course. They'll be assigned your mentor, and they'll have maybe up to 10 of you as part of a group, and they're there to help run workshops to help you settle in as well. So it's really important to bear that in mind, and there will be a lot of support whatever university you go to, but with things like exams and assessments, you can get support through speaking to your personal tutor. We also have people who work in the student support services as well all year round. Do people doing medicine get one-to-one attention? we have got, you will get facilitators helping out with your course and professionals who help out with your case-based learning style. So when you're working together as part of a group to form a project, you will get facilitators there to help out with you. And again, like I said, you will get a personal tutor who can help out with that as well. That we've come to the end. I am going to have to stop there, I'm afraid, just because I don't want to eat into your evening too much. Like I said, hopefully that's given you a bit more of an idea about the personal statement and to what sort of things you want to include and some tips and guidance. We do have the student life talk tomorrow, which you can sign up to via Sked, where you signed up to this talk. We do also have the student finance talk as well on Friday, which gives you more information about finance. But like I said, we are hoping to do something like this again, maybe early next year. So do keep an eye out. This has been a good chance for us to speak to students who maybe needed a bit more information and haven't been able to get it, of course, because of the pandemic. But hopefully it's been helpful. Hopefully it's answered some of your questions. Everyone look after yourselves and take care. And also best wishes for the rest of the year. If you are here tomorrow, make sure you ask as many questions as you can to the students because they are getting paid to do it. So we want to make sure they get we get our money's worth. But also it's a really unique chance to speak to current students who that's going to be you in a few years' time, that you're going to be in their shoes. So really unique chance to find out more. But feel free to leave the chat by pressing leave or end. I'll stop the recording and have a